Well, good deal. Well, thank you so much for letting me present to you. Yes, our company started as OmniDeck. Now it's known as Sage Intacct Forms and Operational Flows. We're very excited about the offering. We've been very hard at work building effectively a toolkit of solutions that really empower the Sage Intacct user to really extend out the process flow from their Sage Intacct instance, and really just adding value to the investment that we've made in our cloud ERP system. We're going to go through a couple of things today, just to kind of define what this platform is. Hopefully, give you guys some maybe some strategy thought in regards to what does our 2-year, 3-year technology roadmap look like? How do we want to increase the value of Intacct over the coming years? Hopefully, you can see this is a pretty great application to kind of build upon. Now, in this, we're going to talk about 4 key features of the platform. It's really kind of made up in forms, the data collection aspect of it. It's a true no-code application, so it's a drag and drop functionality, which we'll get into. But it's fully integrated with your Sage environment. A lot of forms tools that are out there are not integrated. They're really just PDF generators and so on and so forth. Ours is really designed to extend the flow all the way back to the ERP system and obviously eliminate keystrokes. Also, we have the ability to deepen the relationship that we have with external constituents through portals. So we don't have necessarily a specific like vendor portal or customer portal. We have a portal ecosystem that you can really tailor for any persona that would interact with your business. And again, kind of bringing them into these process flows, really saving them from email and third-party applications. So it can really create a really nice just privatized workflow scenario with your constituency. Now, we'll also talk about workflows and the advanced workflow capabilities you'll have in this platform over what is native in Sage. But then also, too, we'll talk a little bit about file management and how enterprise content management anchored to your accounting data is really kind of the missing link in a lot of our going paperless strategies, that they end up on SharePoint sites and folder structures. And that's really where there can kind of become a disconnect and some pretty big manual points that you'll have to go through to be able to store documents and create a powerful enterprise content management strategy. So we'll talk a little bit about that as we go. So the first thing that I was going to talk to is really just like how you can create forms inside of this platform. It is a true no-code designer. It was built to be able to extend this functionality to a team that already works for you. So you don't have to go find developer resources or technical resources. This can literally be an administrator, even a part-time admin that kind of works with your company that can learn the toolkit and they can build processes up, which is really kind of a refreshing thing when we start talking about high dollar customization fees and custom software. This is a wonderful counter to that. Now, the crux though of our forms is that we have a principle in our software is that we want to capture data from anyone or anything. So anyone would be, your employees filling out their forms as a kind of an employee portal. It could be these portal users that are like your subcontractors and vendors and customers submitting forms into you, as well as just web forms. Maybe they're just links on websites that replace an old PDF file or something to that effect. Now, we also can even hook to IoT devices, so facial recognition scanners or weigh stations and aggregate yards for some of our construction guys. Whatever, any kind of device that's got a database that's kind of capturing data, we can actually feed those processes in through a workflow and even update like sales order, for example, in Intacct. So there's a lot of really great functionality when it comes to this. So we're going to kind of talk about that when we show the software. But the biggest thing is that the average customer using this platform uses it for over 18 processes. So they get past that first 1 or 2 processes, maybe vendor onboarding or maybe our customer onboarding process and a customer portal. But once they start growing and they start realizing that they're really empowered to build their own system, they can really take it and run with it. And one of the best client stories that we have, this is FormStack is a large forms platform. Their largest client by volume moved to Intacct, and while doing so, moved to Sage Intacct Forms and Operational Flows. And if you look at really kind of what the defining line is, it wasn't that apples to apples. It was more that it had integration. The same forms they were using for FormStack they could use here, but now they could actually integrate those workflows back in to their ecosystem. So really good testimony here. And we'll talk a little bit about that just to kind of get a little bit of a visualization. So to kind of get some the software's take on that, I'm going to go ahead and log in to my ecosystem. This is the Sage Intacct Forms platform. So you'll see over here to the right, these are the forms from my list. Every division of the company can have forms and process flows, everything from HR forms and volunteer management, vendor onboarding, whatever the case may be. But you'll see up here to the top, I favorited the ones that I do on a daily basis. Maybe part of what I do is maybe I onboard vendors, right? So maybe I'll come in and fill out this information if I get a form in, or B, instead of me filling it out, I could actually copy this link here and email it out to the vendor, and then they can fill out this form and send it on a workflow just with a simple URL link. So you can imagine, being a field employee, having, your expense report or your company credit card receipt form, a purchase requisitioning. All of those forms are fair game, and you can consolidate all of those inside of the system. So to kind of show you how easy it is to build the kind of the true no-code nature of the software, we can start with our library, and our library is a curated list. We let our artificial intelligence kind of make recommended layouts and whatnot. This is also built by best practices from our end users. So these are all complementary. Some forms are obviously, vendor creates and sales orders, things that are more integrated to your Sage ecosystem. Some of them are not. Some of them might be employee scorecards or pay time off requests or, things of that nature too. So they don't have to be so accounting oriented. But if I see a form that, hey, I like this concept, maybe I can modify it and tailor it to my own needs, you can simply add it to your library and go from there. So you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And we're constantly putting more and more templates into the marketplace. Now, the form designer, this is what we mean by, a part-time admin can learn how to use our software. It's really no different, when we start talking about Form Stack or Microsoft Form or Google Form. It's really just kind of a blank canvas of dragging and dropping over the different answer types for any purpose of the form. We came out of construction and field services, so we've got numerous different types of forms, even GPS stamps and media uploads where you can upload a video into a form or a Calendly, a menu item inside of it. So it's got a lot of horsepower in regards to the questions and answers that you can build on the form. But again, it's a simple drag and drop and then configure the different elements of the question as far as, is it required and what question are we asking? If it's a dollar amount, kind of tailoring in, the format that we want, or maybe a date format. So it's a very easy one-to-one comparison to a regular form designer. Now, where it starts to separate and why you would maybe look at moving to our system as a replacement to the existing form system is that if and when a process needs to go back to Intacct, we have this thing called clusters, and clusters is a robust answer type that's designed to be mapped to an existing place in Intacct. So for example, let's say I wanted to do a form for sending in credit card transactions to cash management. Well, I can simply go here to the credit card transaction cluster, and I could drag it over here, and then whenever I click on it, it's now just a mapping exercise to what values do I want populated in my cash management, so that now whenever I connect my bank feed, it can do a reconciliation and a match. So in this case, we can say, okay, well, I've got entity, credit card, and company. But let's say we don't call it entity, we call it, company here, right? So I simply just relabel it, and then now I'm configuring. Maybe we want attachment to be a little bit more friendly. So it's, take a pic of receipt here. And maybe we want to require it, for example. So all of those things is really just kind of type ahead. When it comes to the coding and the distribution of it, we can do, the GL account, maybe the amount, the memo, a department or location or a project, billable flags, whatever the case may be. So what I'm doing here is I'm really just building kind of the phone, tablet, or desktop cadence that I want on a credit card receipt. Now we can build workflows for approvals and whatnot, but effectively the same way that I would do a company credit card receipt to cash management, I could do everything from sending in a purchasing transaction, like a purchase requisition or a receiver ticket, more like one-way traffic. I could do a timesheet or a change request. We can do like, grant awards from that standpoint, even things like an invoice view. So let's say, for example, we wanted to build a form where our vendors could, do their own pay requests. Well, I could come into here and say, call this a pay request here. And then I would say, okay, well, I want this to go in as a vendor invoice, but I want to backfill the data from my purchase order list. And then the same thing's true. I'm just mapping in, the due date, the vendor, how do I want the line items to be? Same concept here. So it's really less dragging and dropping. It's really just kind of configuring, how do I want this grid to lay out, but it's still within the form designer. So if I want them to not only submit their pay app, but also maybe, sign and acknowledge some terms of service for being a vendor, I can do this all with a couple of clicks and some drags and drops. So the entire application is really, full coverage here. Also, some of the things around, project creates, customer creates. In a simple example, which I'll walk through to kind of showcase that Venport testimonial. This was FormStack's largest client. What they did is they effectively wanted to do vendor onboarding and also create a vendor portal experience. So we effectively pulled in the vendor cluster, and then we mapped all the required fields, the display contact information, ACH information, and so on, just by checking off the boxes. So what that looks like kind of in a day in the life is that now, like this is an example of their implementation. They manage 220 charter schools and 2 billion payables on their behalf. It's across 18,000 vendors. So it's got tutorials. It's in Spanish because they're in South Florida. If they want to come, if they already have a login to the vendor network, they can log in here, or they can click here to apply. It walks them through a really easy kind of tutorial where you can apply as an individual or apply as a business. And then based upon whichever form you select, that's what launches you into this vendor onboarding experience. So this is really just the first touch point of the software. All that was really just their graphics and web team. Now, in this example, this is them, like me registering to become a vendor. Inside of the form, we can also do validations. So like, let's say, for example, I wanted to validate the integrity of the phone number. So when I start typing in, it's going to go out, and we use BytePlant for this. So it's going to go out and verify that that's a real phone number. Same thing with an email address. It'll check the format first, and then also do a quick spam check, as well as a ping to make sure that it's a valid email. So it gets a response, so we know that's a good email. Validating the address as well is also available. So we can kind of make sure that all this isn't typed in by the vendor, but it's verified. And then also on the ACH information, being able to make sure that the formatting is correct from that standpoint. And then again, requiring their W-9, they can select here to sign and review terms of agreement, and then hit submit on. So appreciate, just by them checking off the various fields that they wanted in the form designer, they now have this whole portal or this whole portal onboarding experience to kind of initiate their vendor relationship, get that approved and reviewed. This is going to go through a workflow, which is going to verify the social and the name, or the tax ID and the name of the company. So you're going to get all of that really rich validation within our workflow, and then hand it off to Sage. It's going to be created automatically. So I kind of showcase this just to kind of give you a feel for the simple ease of use of our form designer. So the next step of this is, building forms is kind of the pretty straightforward part. It then comes into building workflows up. Now, our workflow engine is very straightforward. So just to kind of give you a little bit of a feel for this, again, this was written for some really light field services people. That's where we originated from. So we really went an extra step by making a centralized inbox, so that's only one place that they have to go. My to-do list, these are all forms waiting on me for approval, so that I know that if I clear out my to-do list, this is my cup of coffee screen in the morning. If I clear this out, I know that I've moved on the workflows. In progress are things that haven't been approved yet, but I've done my job, so I can still check on it if I need to. And then all items is everything that's ever gone through my ecosystem. So from here, it's a very non-threatening chat style interface where I can approve, hold, reject. I can invite other members in if need be. I can also, chat back into here, as well as view a full audit history of this entire transaction. So it's a really nice interface to not really scare anybody away. But the reason why our customers use this thing for over 18 processes is because there's no retraining. There's no other place to approve this. It's all done through the same ecosystem. And this brings up this concept of continuous improvement, where we can continuously roll out new processes as we want, and there's no training required. There's a company which we'll talk about in a little bit that really they ditched a six-figure SharePoint initiative for this software, and what they came up with is that we have a 90% reduction in time and cost to implement new process improvements. We don't have to go shopping for vendors. We don't have to go do retraining. We don't have to, deal with all the username and password setup. It's just another form in the list. So that's why once people get used to kind of self-serving themselves on, okay, well, when I need to buy something, or when I use the company credit card, or when I need to go on vacation, they know to go in the portal, reference the form, and submit it on. Now, this process here of approval, we have some really novel things in regards to how we can handle even the most complex workflow scenarios. The first piece of this is that the application ships with an organizational structure. This is kind of our little demo environment, but I'll show you one that's a little bit more robust from this standpoint here. Call this up. So if I log in here, this is an example of a little bit more elaborate hierarchy structure. This is what it looks like kind of laid out this way. So you've got different divisions within the company, organizational structures, a bigger outfit. What this allows you to do is that when we onboard employees, for example, or we experience churn and offboard, or if we move people around and promote to, they're now the manager of this division and whatever else, it's a one-click movement, and they inherit all the workflow rules, all the form securities, what forms they have access to, even when they go run reports, what all can they see. So it's all administered through this very visual and easy to use organizational structure. And even the portals, the circles or the portals of the external users are also in this mix. So the reason why that's important is that now, whenever I'm building workflow, let's say I've got 200 divisions inside of my company. Well, I can actually come in I'm in the form designer, sorry. I can actually come into the workflow here, and you'll see that I have one default workflow, which is kind of the rule of thumb, but then I can layer in exceptions to the workflow. So let's say, for example, I wanted to build a workflow that goes up one level of that hierarchy. So no matter who submits a purchase request, it's got to go direct supervisor first for approval. And then we could call this, supervisor. Then maybe we get into some dollar amount thresholding, right? In any combination, this is one of the nice enhancements to our system, is that any condition. So if we wanted to route by dollar amount and department and also some variation on the form, I can layer as many conditions into this condition as need be. Then let's say maybe it's a dollar amount greater than a number, then it can go through another level of approval. But then once I'm done with this final level of approval, I can hit action. And this is where the integration component comes to Intacct, is that based upon whatever cluster I'm using on the forms, if I'm creating a customer, creating a vendor, updating purchasing, that'll show what's available to me for my Intacct integration. So really, by dragging and dropping and building the form, by kind of configuring this workflow to lean on the hierarchy structure that we've defined. And again, you don't have to use the hierarchy. You can do absolute kind of one-off wrinkles and as many wrinkles to a workflow scenario as you need to. It really is a point and click and save, and I'm done. So I can literally take process creation in the middle of an operations meeting offline to about an hour-long session of kind of building a form, building up a workflow, and then assigning it out. And I've now just implemented a new process that we can roll out tomorrow if need be. So that's really the beauty of that. When we start talking about a true no-code designer, this is kind of the elements that we're talking about, is that you don't have to be very technical to be able to figure out this software. Now, a couple of other things that I do want to speak to is the application's ability to be a file management or enterprise content management solution. I'll give you a little bit of a taste of this. So remember, we're anchored to the accounting data. So let's say, for example, I wanted to get a contract in place, and maybe we want to do this through a portal experience with our subcontractors. In this case, I'm going to select a contractor, and let's call it ABC Office Supplies. And then maybe we're going to put this in for this project or this grant or something along those lines. Well, before I put this contract in place, I just want to check on this vendor. If I go click this link with security, so it's only going to show me what I can actually see. This is going to go and show me all of the data that I'm privy to out of the vendor record. This is going to show me every form submission ever for this vendor. So think about the more forms you commit to it. So we're talking about like their vendor onboarding, if they updated their information. Maybe there's some internal forms where we're doing requalification of suppliers, and maybe we're doing see something, say something on any type of quality out in the field that we want to get a rating of how well they've done. Maybe some completion photos. Like all of those forms are fair game. Well, it's creating that automatically. No one actually has to put the form in a file somewhere. So for example, if I wanted to go in and go look at, say, well, I've gotten 31 contracts with this vendor, and let's say I wanted to just go see, the most recent one for whatever terms we put in. Not only could I go see the agreement, I could also see any notes that were going back and forth, the conversation with the vendor. I have all of that at my discretion. Now, you also have an activity log. So this is like the chronological order. This feature was, hey, what's the last thing we did with this vendor? But this is applied to any dimension. So at a project level, you can say, what's the latest project forms that were filled out? So you can really get a nice view of what's the kind of the activity going on with a particular dimension or an asset. So I've now got this form in place. I now want to, put in a non-disclosure agreement and get that in place. This is a fully editable document that I could come in and maybe take out this section 2.14 or make a modification. I can do all that. But just like DocuSign, instead of like dragging and dropping over a box for them to sign, I could say, okay, I need Chris to sign this, and then I'm going to countersign it as the admin here. So I now hit submit and move it on, and now we're working in a workflow to gain the signature of the vendor and then our countersign. But all that can happen inside of the portal. So that's the first touch point in file management. I also have that same function, we call it channels, in more of a standalone scenario. So this is every dimension out of Intacct. So like if I wanted to go into a customer record, I could go into the customer, pick any customer that's in my record, pull it in, and then see all of the activity about them as well. But I could do this at a vendor level. I could do this at a volunteer level. So any data that we're touching on, this is just creating this really powerful file management system, but no one's having to administer it. Just by you creating projects, creating vendors in Intacct, and then building forms that reference them, it's just creating a really nice holistic solution. And if you kind of look at it from this perspective too, this is a Microsoft application framework. It's on Azure Cloud.